Abai wrote, and God could not be omitted from any program, even in the name of a secular state. Krishna, as the father of all living beings, had jurisdiction over all programs, organizations, and governments. Indians especially should appreciate the universal scope of Bhagavad Gita. Although Abai always had a plan of action behind his suggestions, he first sought the interest of his correspondent. There wasn't much interest, and he was repeatedly turned down. But he never felt discouraged. He always anticipated finding a sympathizer. He kept copies of all his letters and their replies. A word of appreciation or a slight show of interest from a correspondent being sufficient to elicit from Abai another thoughtful reply. He had developed a keen sense of dedication to Lord Chaitanya's mission without expecting leadership from the Gaudiya Math. He still cherished the idea that his godbrothers would soon come together and preach, but he didn't put any energy in the Maths, since to do so would mean to become involved in one of the factions. Staying clear of the Gaudiya Math's internal fray, Abai continued his letter-writing campaign alone, introducing himself as a preacher of Bhagavad Gita and editor of Back to Godhead magazine. So Prabhupada ki! Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, chapter 21, text 2 to 4. So I'll just read the Sanskrit and translation of text 2 and 3, and then we'll go to text 4. Chandana Guru Toyardra, Ratyachat Paramargavat, Pushpakshata Laistokmar, Lajai Archi Vir Architam. Fragrant water distilled from sandalwood and a guru herb were sprinkled everywhere on the lanes, roads, and small parks throughout the city. And everywhere were decorations of unbroken fruits, flowers, wetted grains, varied minerals and lamps, all presented as auspicious paraphernalia. Sorry, I'll just say what we're reading. Instructions by Maharaj Prithu is the name of the chapter, and Maharaj Prithu is coming back to his capital. And this is how the residents, the citizens had decorated the city to welcome back the king. Savridai Kadali Stambhai, Uga Podai Parishkitam, Darubala Vamala, Sarvata Samalankitam. At the street crossings, there were bunches of fruits and flowers, as well as pillars of banana trees and betel nut branches. All these combined decorations everywhere looked very attractive. So this is the one for today. Rajastham Dipavali Samrita Shesha Mangalai Abhiyumishta Kanyashta Nishta Kundala Mandita Rajastham Dipavali Samrita Shesha Mangalai Abhiyumishta Kanyashta Nishta Kundala Mandita Rajastham Dipavali Samrita Shesha Mangalai Viyumishtakunyascha Mishtakundalamandita word. Raja, citizens, come to him. Deepavali with lamps. Samvrita equipped with. Ashisha unlimited. Mangalai auspicious article. IBU came forward to welcome. Mrishta with beautiful bodily luster. Kanyacha and unmarried girls. Mrishta lighting with. Kundala earrings. Mandita being bedecked with. Translation. As the king entered the gate of the city, all the citizens received him with many auspicious articles like lamps, flowers, and yogurt. The king was also received by many beautiful unmarried girls whose bodies were bedecked with various ornaments, especially with earrings which collided with one another. Of course. Offerings of natural products such as betel nuts, bananas, newly grown wheat, paddy, yogurt, and vermilion, carried by the citizens and scattered throughout the city, are all auspicious paraphernalia, according to Vedic civilization, for receiving a prominent guest like a bridegroom, king, or spiritual master. Similarly, a welcome offered by unmarried girls who are internally and externally clean and are dressed in nice garments and ornaments is also auspicious. Kumari, or unmarried girls untouched by the hand of any member of the opposite sex, are auspicious members of society. Even today, in Hindu society, the most conservative families do not allow unmarried girls to go out freely and mix with boys. They are very carefully protected by their parents, while unmarried. After marriage, they are protected by their young husbands, and when elderly, they are protected by their children. When thus protected, women as a class remain an always auspicious source of energy to man. Om Jnana Tindramasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Adi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. As the king entered the gate of the city, all the citizens received him with many auspicious articles like lamps, flowers, and yogurt. The king was also received by many beautiful unmarried girls whose bodies were bedecked with various ornaments, especially with earrings which collided with one another. Hare Krishna. So yesterday, the verse was introducing this beautiful image of opulence that comes from natural gifts. Achyuta Baba gave an amazing class about natural opulence and how, in the purport Prabhupada said, such opulence immediately changes the condition of the mind. And she was saying how in this temple, even our guest that came for the first time, she's like, oh, it's beautiful, beautiful pictures. And it's soothing for the mind to be surrounded by beauty, especially if it's natural. All the designs on the floor or everywhere, you can see beauty. And here we're getting more description of how the city has been decorated to receive this very special guest. It's hard to imagine now how, like, if the leader, political leader would come, that everyone would be, receiving them like that, the same relationship as it used to be. Because the king in these times, in Vedic times, he was an actual representative of God. So he was like a father trying to protect the citizens from acting in ways that are harming to themselves and to others, and trying to connect them with their divine source, Krishna. So in that way, everyone was looking forward to receiving this guest. And it reminded me of how when I was living with my husband in Gitanagari, in this farm in America, my spiritual teacher would come twice a year, I think. And every time we would receive him, we didn't have all these things and we didn't know, like, oh yeah, we should receive him with lamps and flowers and yogurt. What we received him was with chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. And we'd all be, looking forward to him. We all knew when he was coming, and we'd be outside chanting and receiving him. That was the way we thought was most fit to receive our spiritual teacher. So it's basically a way of expressing our love. And I also see it in my house. When I come home from my practicum at a school that I'm doing a practicum at right now, or when my husband comes home, both of our children are like, Mommy, Mommy, and they come and they hug me, Daddy! And that's their way of receiving someone they love. And here, when I first read this purport, my conditioning of being born in a Western country first just went like, why do women need to be protected? And it's like kind of like my default because of my conditioning. And I was talking with a friend and she just started giving me so many examples, real life examples of how people she knows have suffered because they weren't protected. And then it just, opened my eyes a bit. And and I was doing a bit of research yesterday and it's pretty dark. I guess because I'm in my bubble of being around people that are very loving and caring and protective. I'm not so aware of the realities. They're not in my face, but yeah. I just wanted to share one which is not that gruesome. Just a study that was done in the UK of 1,000 women between 18 and 24. And 97% of them said that they had somehow had some form of sexual harassment. They had experienced that. And it's just what's happened to society in the last, 60, 70 years, is that it's just, there's a lot of violence, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate in many ways. Like we hear in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna was presenting to Krishna one of the reasons to not go into this war was because then a lot of women would have lost their husbands, their fathers, and then they would not be protected. And that means that people are born without like the actual desire of having a child. They're born because of other reasons, and then those children aren't loved like they deserve. And this reality struck me in my practicum. There's one little girl that she's been going from foster home to foster home, and she's been abused, and you can see how it's affected her mind, and it's tragic that that's the case. So anyways, coming back to protection, when there isn't protection, there's exploitation. And it's a broad topic, and I was trying to approach it from different angles. So one way is we're talking about the king here, Raj Pritu, and I remember when I was young and studying in Argentina, we would study the royalty in Europe. I guess that's what the curriculum was, and all the kings and the Middle Ages and all this. And I remember reading that the king was a representative of God, like before. And I was struck by that because I was seeing all these examples of kings, and I'm like, they're representing God. They're not doing a very good job. And but that's the model ideally, and it has happened for a long time, but just in the recent hundreds of years it hasn't, because we're in an age that's called Kali, an age of quarrel and hypocrisy. There's a hierarchy, not of power in the sense of exploitation, but of protection and care and giving shelter. And so on the top would be, is always God, is always Krishna, whatever name we want to call him. And the person at the top is supposed to be representing them, not to become God, because no one is God but Krishna, but to be a transparent via medium to connect people to Krishna, to give them that protection so that they can actually be safe in their lives and just focus on the highest thing, giving them that love, that care. So always when there's someone superior to another, the relationship should be of love, not of exploitation, not of abuse of power. And even now, like being in a classroom, I see how the setup of the classroom is the teacher is the boss. And if the teacher loves the children she's teaching, then it's a wonderful thing because she's looking out for their welfare. She's trying to teach them so they can learn not only the curriculum, but also values. But if the teacher doesn't love the kids, and there's a lot of abuse of power, even in the classroom. And it's horrible in all aspects, not just in the classroom, but everywhere we see, in the workplace, anywhere and everywhere. So the idea of someone that's in that role of power is that they're looking out for the welfare of whoever they've got in their care. I was also thinking about how the girls, and today we have a lot of young girls in the temple. They're an auspicious, they're auspicious, and auspicious, I was thinking, is the same as being pure. And that purity comes from not being contaminated. And by what? By activities that are sinful or material or that do us harm and others, do us harm and do others harm. That purity is so attractive. Anyone that's living a life of purity is very, very attractive. And we'll come back to a good example of that at the end. Yeah, so I'll leave that on standby, an example of purity. And then I was also thinking how we understand in our philosophy of Krishna consciousness and Vaishnava philosophy that there's Krishna, the Purusha, and then there's his internal and external energy, Prakriti. So he's the energetic and everyone else is the energy. And in this material world, we're taking on these roles of, and I'm in this life, I'm in this female body, and another life, I might have been in a male body, like whatever. So we're taking on these roles of female and male, and they're kind of showing the principle of Purusha and Prakriti in the material roles. So the soul inside a male body is also Prakriti, but is taking on this role of Purusha, and not to become Krishna, but to take that role of being the protector, the giving care and shelter, in the same way as we take shelter of Krishna. And so as soon as the soul in a male body thinks that he is the enjoyer, like the energetic and all that, and that's when the problem comes. But as long as that soul in the male body is being a transparent via medium and just representing Krishna and trying to connect the Prakriti, the energy, into Krishna, then it's pure. And but I was also thinking, because we're all energy, then we're all taking shelter of Krishna, male and female. And what are what is that shelter? What is that protection that we're asking Krishna to give us? Ultimately is to protect us from our own desires to do things that harm us and others, or our material desires. And to take shelter of Krishna means to take shelter of serving Krishna in all the different ways, by chanting the mantra, by doing active service on the altar, by reading about Krishna, by working for Krishna, by studying for Krishna, everything with this desire to serve. And that way we're taking shelter of Krishna. And I was thinking how when you take shelter of someone, if they let you down, usually you'd blame them if it's like a material thing. Like even if it's like your body, you're taking shelter of your body by looking after it, and and making it strong and exercising, and then it lets you down by getting hurt, and then you're like, oh, get disappointed. Or if you take shelter of a friend and you really, you're trusting that friend, and then they disappoint you in some way, they hurt you, they're not there when you need them, then you get, upset. But I see the perfect example of the devotees of Krishna is that even when Krishna does something that seems like they're taking shelter of him, and then he does something that seems like he's not actually protecting them, they don't blame him. They know that there's a reason for that, and they trust him, and they still take shelter of him. And the perfect example is of Giridhari. So in that pastime, when Krishna was here 5,000 years ago, his father was doing this very elaborate ceremony or sacrifice for Indra, for this personality. And Krishna, as a young little boy, comes and says, no, don't do that. Worship Govardhan Hill. And he convinces his father. And so it's like, okay, whatever you want. And so they do that. And what happens? They get flooded, completely flooded. And it's like a devastation. And but no one says like, Krishna, it was your fault. You don't hear that in the pastime at all. They still go to Krishna for protection. And they know that Krishna always is always there for them. And so then he lives Govardhan Hill, and they have a beautiful, amazing, loving festival for 7 days. And that wouldn't have happened if the whole devastation hadn't occurred and the flooding. So Krishna always has a reason for why he does things. And we can see in our lives, if we trust him, he'll show us why he's doing this. And I was thinking of an example in my life when as soon as I came to New Zealand, I met the devotees, and I felt, yes, this is where I want to be. I met my spiritual teacher, and I knew that I wanted to be here but it was very hard because of visas and having to leave all the time and go to different parts of the world until I could come back to New Zealand. And then one time, I went back to Argentina, and I had been encouraged to apply for a visa to go to Melbourne as a religious visa. And so then I did all the paperwork, which I always find very emotionally taxing. And I had already been to Melbourne twice and lived in the ashram in the temple for 3 months each time, the maximum of my visitor's visa. And then, so when I was applying, I went to the embassy, Australian embassy in Argentina, everything. And then I got the letter that I was rejected. And I didn't know why. What did I do? I did everything that they asked, and I was, saying I said all the truth, where I had been, and all the things they asked. And the reason was because I was in a visitor's visa, and I had said that I had been volunteering at a temple, and they see volunteer as volunteer work. So they said, you were working. I was like, but I wasn't getting paid. It doesn't matter, you were working. And because of that, they said, you violated the visitor's visa conditions, so we don't want you in our country. And so it was heartbreaking for me. But I don't think I blamed Krishna. I just said, okay, there must be a reason for this. And it took a long time to manifest. But finally, a year later, I think it was a year later, I ended up coming to New Zealand. And if I would have been, accepted, maybe I wouldn't have come back to New Zealand. So Krishna always has a plan, and maybe I wouldn't have married my husband. So it's like, I'm so grateful that Krishna has his ways of doing things, and that's the role of a protector is not to do the way that we want, because then we're the boss. But a protector, a real protector like Krishna, he knows what's best for us, and so then we can trust him. Because as soon as we start being the boss, then what's the point of, there's no protecting relationship. Same with our children. When our children ask us to do things and we know it's not best for them, to be the protectors, to actually say no, even though it's hard. Because if not, it's like they're the boss, and then afterwards they start feeling unprotected, and that's not psychologically healthy. Anyway, so my spiritual teacher gave class on Friday, and it was an amazing class. And he was talking about how the verse of Bhagavad Gita where Krishna is talking about the rivers flowing, like our material desires flowing. Oh, I don't have my Bhagavad Gita. Does anyone know that verse or the translation by chance? I remember when I read it. It's at the end of what chapter? I don't remember. I'm so rusty with my Bhagavad Gita knowledge. But anyway, so he was talking about the desires flowing like rivers. But then he said, if we're immersed in the ocean of bhakti, the ocean of loving service to Krishna, those rivers are like nothing, an ocean compared to the river. So that's the way of taking, like I was saying before, taking shelter of Krishna is being completely immersed in the ocean. I was also inspired this week. I was listening to a very good class by this teacher, Madhuryamrita, and she was saying how I could relate to this because I'm coming from a Catholic background. That in Christianity in general, there's this idea of the original sin. You probably all heard Adam and Eve, the apple, and so the underlying philosophy is that the person is impure, and some sects of Christianity are like through faith, believing in Jesus. That's how you get heaven. You become pure again, or through works. But the basic point is that we're impure to start off with. And it made a lot of sense for me, because then she said, the mood, at least from my experience in Catholicism, is very like punitive, like putting you down, like, oh. And a friend of mine always says, like, mea culpa, like slashing herself. It's kind of like very, very heavy and like, oh, you know, I'm sinful and this, you know. But actually, if we understand the very contrasting perspective of Vaishnavism, of Krishna consciousness, of Hare Krishna, is that we're always pure, eternally pure, full of knowledge and happiness and bliss. The soul, that's the quality of the soul. We're pure. And it's just that when we contact material energy or we become covered by material desires of wanting to enjoy matter, that's when our purity is a little bit covered. And the whole idea of Krishna consciousness is to clean that covering. And so I was thinking, because this verse is talking about auspiciousness and purity, and she was saying in the class, Madhuryamrita, that if you ever feel like you have a moment of low self-esteem, just go to Nectar of Devotion and start reading the qualities of Krishna, because the first 50 qualities are also in the soul, in a minute quantity, of course, compared to Krishna's unlimitedness. But still, we have those qualities. And it's just a matter of bringing them out. And one of those is that Krishna is pure. And we are also pure. Not originally sinful, but actually originally pure. And in that section of Nectar of Devotion, purity is described as in two ways. That we can, the person that's pure, or in this case Krishna, he can deliver others, so he can purify others, and he never does anything by which he can be contaminated. So those are the two aspects of purity. And of course, when I read that, I thought of the perfect example of purity, Srila Prabhupada, and how he's an example of both, of being able to deliver others or connecting others to Krishna, and he never did anything by which he could be contaminated. And his body was elderly. He was an elderly man, but if you hear descriptions of people that were around him, they said he was so attractive. And yet that, like I said before, that attractiveness is coming from his purity. And I was just seeing this presentation that someone was talking about different qualities, and the ones that I saw related to this purity were this is interesting. So faultless. So it's related because it means that he doesn't do anything which is faulty or contaminating. And this is from a lecture on Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, verse 14 to 22. And Prabhupada is saying, one who has cultured himself, that these different activities of the material world have nothing to do with it. His only business is to become Krishna conscious. Then it is to be understood that he has conquered death, even in this present life. This sort of equilibrium in the transcendental stage of Krishna consciousness is called faultless. It is faultless life. And that reminded me of one of the points I remembered from the class on Friday that the spiritual teacher gave, and he gave the example of women in different parts of the world. I've seen in India, women, like a performance of women wearing pots in their heads, like 10 pots, like one from big to small, and dancing. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's amazing. It's like, how do they do it? And so he was giving this example of someone dancing, you know, but also having, you know, the pot on their head, so they're focused that the pot's not going to fall. And the analogy was, if I get it right, that we're engaging in this world, we're dancing, we're engaging in this world, but our consciousness, like the consciousness of the dancers and the pot, that it won't fall, our consciousness is inside, connecting to Krishna, serving Krishna, offering what we're doing to Krishna. We have like an internal life that as devotees we're trying to cultivate. So whatever we're doing, we're actually not forgetting Krishna. We were talking about this with another friend, how sometimes we seem very busy, but where is our heart when we're doing all these things? Is it actually with Krishna? And to cultivate that, like Prabhupada saying, and in this, I was reading this part of the Bhagavad Gita this morning, from 14 to more than 22, and say if I have it, but Prabhupada's reiterating this point of having that internal connection whilst we're in the world, like be in this world but not of this world. And that's very, very, very important, because that's how we develop this purity. Another quality of Prabhupada's is magnanimous. And this is a letter he wrote September 4th, 1972. The spiritual master accepts the sinful activities of his disciples from the first initiation. I may give initiation very easily, but what can I do? I am prepared to go to hell for the service of Lord Chaitanya. And when I read that, I was so struck by how someone can be so giving that they're prepared to suffer for others. That he's prepared to take on all that bad karma of other people so that they can progress in their spiritual life, because he's wanting to serve Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. And he's prepared to go to the horrible regions in this universe just to be able to give those people a chance to connect with Krishna. It's the most striking example of magnanimity. And like we were saying, someone that's pure, they can deliver others. And then the last example, surrender to Krishna. And Prabhupada wrote in a letter on June 21st, 1970. So for my present life, so far my present life is concerned, I do not remember any part of my life when I was forgetful of Krishna. And again, that's coming back to the example of the lady with the pot. Whatever Prabhupada was doing, he was always connected to Krishna. And I was hearing an example from Prabhupada's life that he trusting Krishna was when the devotees wanted to get the land in Mumbai, and Mr. Nair, the person that sold the land, was cheating them. And then after many years of being in lawsuits, they finally got the land. And then Prabhupada said, Krishna didn't tell me that this person was a cheater. So he had this, conversation, internal like connection with Krishna. Krishna didn't tell me. It must be because he wanted this land. And that's why. So, in conclusion, I found it very inspiring to be immersed in the example of Srila Prabhupada and how he's very pure, and hopefully you have also found that inspiring, and we can try to follow in his footsteps, because the more Krishna conscious we are, the more we can give protection to others in the sense of helping them to grow spiritually and to not waste their human lives and just trying to enjoy this material world. And the more Krishna conscious we are, the more we can be caring and trying to connect everyone to Krishna, who is everyone's best friend. Jai Prabhupada ki. If anyone has a question or a comment or a realization, if not, that's okay too. Yes? Sorry, Salila? Yeah. Yeah. Another example that I was hearing is when Krishna told the cowherd boys and the cows to go drink water from the Yamuna, and it was poisoned, and they drank it and they passed out. But then Krishna looked at them and revived them, but they didn't blame him either. So it's like there's so many examples. Krishna, the devotees are always taking shelter of Krishna at every moment, almost every day, every moment. Yeah, there's so many things are happening all the time in Vrindavan. But yeah, that's true. Usually people, first person they blame is God. Why me? Why this? But if we understand who Krishna is, who is this person? He's the supreme controller. He's the supreme enjoyer, but he's also our best friend. And that gives us peace, like that verse in Bhagavad Gita. That's how we feel peaceful, because we know we're in Krishna's hands and he wants the best for us. He wants us to be with him. He wants us to remember him so that we can, reestablish that eternal relationship. Thank you. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.